It's early June, and you know what that means? Obligatory E3 videos. Oh boy, can't you just sense the excitement in my voice? Being the contrarian douche that I am, I'm not gonna be chiming in with the majority of YouTubers about how hyped they are for E3. That it would be a massive lie, but also because I think most people find it obnoxious when some douche nozzle turns on their microphone and is like, hey guys, E3 2017 is gonna be so awesome. We're gonna get third-person shooters and first-person shooters and sequels that we already know about and games that should have already come out by now. I'm so excited. I'm almost ready to jizz my pants. As I'm sure many of you are aware, my opinions on E3 basically get worse and worse every year. You know, when I started really paying a lot more attention to the gaming industry, I used to actually get excited for E3, but that was a long time ago. As it stands right now, pretty much every time E3 rolls around, my opinion on it, pre-E3, borders on apathetic. I just don't care. And I guess it's kind of a lie because I obviously care to some extent, which is why I watch all the conferences and put myself through that torment. But, in terms of expectations for E3, I expect very little now, and I would recommend that other people do this too, because when you expect nothing, you're never gonna get disappointed. Well, I mean, you might get disappointed, but if you expect nothing, then you're at least in a better position. If you come into E3 every year, like so many people do, excited and thinking it's gonna be like the best E3 ever, you are setting yourself up to be disappointed. Think back on the last 4 or 5 E3s. Think about how good or bad you think they were. And by this, I mean, don't just think about that one or conference that you liked, since there's always usually one good conference at every E3. I'm talking about the whole thing, the whole picture, when we're talking about Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and all the third parties, as well as the announcements leading up to, during, and shortly after E3. Take all of that together and really think, was that one that I think was good actually as good as I thought it was? Wow, that was a shit sentence. To rephrase, was that E3 as good as I thought it was? Was I looking at it objectively, or was I just focusing on the announcements I personally liked, or the one conference that I liked? I think you can look back at every E3 and see good things about every E3. I mean, I'm not that, well, I am a very cynical person, but even I'm not that cynical. I look back at E3 2014, which was probably the worst one we've had in the last 5 years or so. And even for that E3, there were some good announcements. There were some things that got me excited. I mean, of course there were. There's always something to get me excited. But when I look at the broad picture for pretty much every E3, there are so many things that happen that I don't like that make it hard for me to look at any of them and say, yeah, that was good. I can only point to 1 or 2 conferences every year that were good or great, which is very rare nowadays, but only a few good ones, most of them boring. Some of the conferences are outright bad. I think some of this has to do with the biases that people have coming into every E3, and I'm not applying this to your average gamer. Like, I don't think the average gamer is coming in with expectations too warped in one way or the other, and I'm talking about for the consoles. But when you see a lot of these vocal people on YouTube who frankly have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, sort of trying to spin bad conferences or just, you know, mediocre conferences as though they're better than they are, and then it informs the perception of the broader gaming community. It's especially a problem with people who have sycophantic followers. For example, do you think that an Xbox fanboy or somebody whose entire online identity is based around Xbox, do you think that they're going to come into E3 objectively and actually talk about the merits of each conference objectively? Do you honestly think that someone who dedicates most of their time talking about Microsoft, or even worse, just flat out promoting everything that Microsoft does with the Xbox, saying that it's the best ever, and perhaps even more than that, because there's always an extra level, people who basically dedicate all of their time to being staunchly anti-Sony, do you think that they're going to tell you that a Microsoft conference was bad? Honestly, do you think that they're going to do that? It happens with every company. Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, happens all the time. And this sort of stuff seems to inform people's opinions on certain E3s about whether they're good or bad, just based on 1 or 2 conferences. And so then people start thinking that the E3 was better than it actually was. The way that I look at E3 is, How many surprises were there? First and foremost, that's really the big one. How many surprises were there? If there were no surprises, or pretty much everything that was announced we already knew about, or it was a game that should have been out by now, or it was announced last year, or it was leaked beforehand, if it's nothing but that, then I can't really consider it to be good, because I watch E3 to be surprised and to see new announcements, not just extra stuff for games that were announced like 2 years ago and should be out at this stage. The next measure for whether or not these conferences are good is how much gameplay is actually shown. What you'll find with a lot of conferences, especially lately, is that the majority of time is not even spent on games themselves, where they spend far too much time talking as opposed to showing, which doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me as a viewer of an E3 conference. If your platform was the best place to play, you wouldn't need to tell me it 50 times in the span of an hour. Another metric that I think is pretty important for the consoles as a PC gamer, personally, and since so many people are PC gamers, is the amount of exclusives that are shown. If Call of Duty gets trotted out on Sony's stage, that's not a prop to Sony because it's not a Sony game. It doesn't incentivize me to buy a PlayStation 4. I already have one. But if I was someone who didn't own a PS4 and I saw Call of Duty or Battlefield or Far Cry trotted out on Microsoft or Sony's stage, why would that make me want to buy the console? Because there's content that's been locked away from other gamers on that particular platform? Like, for me, it's a bullshit thing, but it's not big enough for me to want to buy it on that system. And if someone owns a PC, or they own an Xbox, or they own a PlayStation, just one of them, it does nothing. It does nothing to incentivize them to buy that platform. So really, it's only there to say, hey, we have third-party games on our console, even though we already know that you do. So it's pointless. Show us the games that you're working on, that you're funding, or that you're developing in-house. Most importantly though, I think it's important to note that if there are abundance of CGI trailers, then the conference is not good in any stretch of the imagination. But most importantly, above all of that, is the fact that now, as a self-respecting gamer, you should know that a lot of the stuff you see at E3 is just a farce. It's just smoke and mirrors. It's not the final game that you're gonna get a lot of the time. Sometimes it's minimal things like graphical downgrades don't matter that much to me, but with some games you see major gameplay overhauls or the removal of really interesting mechanics. And these are things that matter to me. So when I watch something at E3 and it looks really good, a thought in the back of my mind is going, yeah, but it's probably not true, is it? This is probably just like a vertical slice of the game. Or something's gonna change when it comes out, or they're not showing us the bad parts, and there'll be some sort of asterisk attached to this. And it's those kind of thoughts that make it impossible for me to look at most of the conferences and be excited for the things that are shown. Because so many times, they've just ended up not being as good as we thought they'd be. And it's not because we had unrealistic expectations, it's because what we were shown was not what we got. Only company you can trust to really show you the game itself is Nintendo. But the issue with Nintendo is that they're so inconsistent that every E3, you can never come in thinking they're gonna have a good one or they're gonna have a bad one. You don't know because they just do whatever they want. I just want a new Metroid game. So yeah, I'm not doing any of these prediction videos or, hey, who do you think's gonna win E3? Because I really give a shit. I'm not doing any of that stuff because it's just pointless. Every E3 comes and goes, and usually, most people end up disappointed. I certainly do, I'm sure many of you do, and even your casual gamer, you know, the person who's not always looking into gaming news and stuff like that, they look at the announcements and probably aren't always that impressed either. And part of it is because there are just issues endemic to the gaming industry. But of course, to extract some joy out of E3, I'll be doing my standard witty remarks on Twitter, mocking everything that's shown and giving no credit where it's due, because that's a lot more fun than being a sycophantic idiot. First conference is EA, aren't you just ecstatic?